The year is 2016. 11-year-old me is in his first year of middle school. One day, Israel, my friend from 5th grade, who I still hang out with, sits with me at lunch and says, "Hey, have you ever played Final Fantasy?"
So I went home that afternoon, went on to Emu Paradise when I was still alive, clicked Super Nintendo, and searched Final Fantasy. I didn't really know which one to play, so I clicked a random one. That one happened to be Final Fantasy 3, which is actually Final Fantasy 6.
When I clicked on that link, I don't think I realized how this game would turn out to be my favorite video game of all time. I found this specific cartridge at my grandma's house, my dad's old house, because apparently his brother used to play it all the time and he actually beat it. So, yeah, this is a great game. Like I said, it's my favorite game of all time. Definitely my favorite Final Fantasy game. But unfortunately, that's not what I'm talking about today.
So before I talk about Final Fantasy V, I'm gonna have to give you a little backstory. Final Fantasy was released for the Famicom in 1987 in Japan, and the sequel, Final Fantasy II, was released a year later. Then, in 1990, Square released Final Fantasy in the States for the NES, and simultaneously released Final Fantasy III in Japan. The Super Nintendo launched in 1991, and instead of releasing Final Fantasy II and III on the NES, Square just released Final Fantasy IV on the Super Famicom and SNES. However, since Final Fantasy II and III never came to America, they called the game Final Fantasy II since it was the second one in America. Now, the Final Fantasy series did amazing in Japan, and basically single-handedly dug Square Enix out of bankruptcy, or it was called Square back then. However, in the States it did very poorly, and Square decided that the reason it was doing so badly was because JRPGs were too hard or complex for casual American consumers. So when they released Final Fantasy V in Japan, Square deemed it too hard for the West and instead released Final Fantasy Mystic Quest, which was extremely dumbed down and frankly bad. Suffice it to say, Mystic Quest did worse than Final Fantasy 1 and 4, so when Square released Final Fantasy 6 in Japan, they released it in America as Final Fantasy 3.
Alright, so that was a lot of preamble. Let's get into the actual game already.
So, Final Fantasy V. Let's start with the intro. Dawn sets on Tycoon Castle, and the king here takes his Hiryu, or Hiryu, I don't really know how to pronounce it, to the Wind Shrine. Before he goes, he tells his daughter, Lena, that he senses something wrong with the Wind Crystal and has to go check it out. And yes, this is another game with 4 crystals representing 4 elements. Anyways, next we find the pirate Ferris, and he's like, "Hey, the wind stopped." Then this crazy old guy Galuf is in a meteor, and he's like, "I gotta hurry to the Wind Shrine." Then it goes back to King Tycoon inside the Wind Shrine, and the Wind Crystal shatters into pieces. Then this doofus shows up with the Chocobo.
And then a meteor destroys the entire world.
Nah, I'm just kidding. It barely makes a dent. However, it does provide us with this lovely noise. And now we have full control of unnamed Chocobo Doofus. So obviously we go over to investigate the meteor and wow, you actually have control of the Chocobo inside areas. That's pretty cool. Anyways, we go to investigate the meteor and we meet Lena, who's surrounded by goblins.
Now might be a good time to talk about the combat.
Final Fantasy V takes the active time battle system from Final Fantasy IV, but adds a visible gauge to let you know how close the character's turn is. Battle actions, instead of being special for each character, are special for each job. Yes, the job system from Final Fantasy III is back, and it's way more polished in this game. Instead of earning capacity in order to change your job and leveling that job skill up to do more hits, you earn ability points, or AP, and use that to increase your job level, which earns you abilities. You can use any job's abilities in any job, so this creates some pretty unique and wacky combinations. Want to have a samurai using white magic? Bam! How about a white mage that can equip swords? It's a dumb idea, but go ahead, you can. Jobs also change your hit points and stats, and mastering any job by getting it to the maximum level will not only give you all the abilities for that job, but also give any stat bonuses that job gives to all your other classes. First time I beat this game on an emulator, I got to the final dungeon, ground monsters until I had mastered every job for every character, bringing me up to about level 70. Then used the freelance job with the X-Attack ability and the Magic Blade ability, along with pretty much maxed out stats from all the mastered jobs to basically obliterate the final boss. Right. So after we save Lena by killing the goblins, we get to name our character. In America his name is Bartz, but in Japan his name is Butts.
Now there's a contender for the worst Final Fantasy character name of all time, right next to Tidus and Argas.
Lena and Butts hear a sound nearby, and they found the old man Galuf, or Galoof, if you will, who conveniently has amnesia. Lena mentions that she has to go to the Wind Shrine to find her father, and Galuf's like, "Oh yeah, that's right, I gotta do that too." So they head off, and Bartz leaves with his chocobo, named Boko by the way. The next day, Bartz and Boko are walking around, and suddenly there's an earthquake, and they run from it.
What?
So Bartz runs to Boko, picks up an unconscious Lena and Galuf, fights some more goblins, and then boom, he makes his way to a cave. A pirate's cave to be exact. The Wind Shrine apparently can only be accessed by water, so they try to steal the pirate's ship. And they fail miserably, of course. They're captured and taken to the brig by Ferris, the pirate from the opening cutscene. He's about to maroon them or something when he's distracted by Lena's locket, and it turns out that he has the same locket himself. So he inexplicably changes his mind and joins the party.
Hooray, I guess.
Now the player has control of Ferris' ship, and can take it wherever they want. Except only 2 locations are accessible, a generic town and the place where you need to go next, so it's really just an illusion of freedom.
You see, that's a recurring theme throughout this game. I can think of maybe 3, 4 side quests throughout this entire game, or moments of non-linearity, but that all of them are pretty much in the late game. Whenever you get to a new area or get a new mode of transportation, it's never a choice between where you want to go next. It's more, hey, do you want to do some grinding or actually continue with what you're supposed to do next? Like, it's very hand-holdy in that way. Sort of like Mystic Quest. Or Final Fantasy II.
So yeah, some things happen. The party gets some jobs from the crystal shards. Ferris is actually a woman. Lena's father is being controlled by an evil tree. And eventually we get the airship from Siri, Staples, Sid, and his grandson, Mid. At this point all the crystals have shattered, and Galuf's memory is returned. He's actually the ruler of an alien kingdom, and he's one of the 4 warriors who sealed away Exdeath, the aforementioned evil tree, using the 4 crystals, and the crystals shattered because Exdeath is trying to escape. And he does, immediately leaving the planet and returning to the alien planet that Galuf is the ruler of. Galuf, worried, takes off on his granddaughter Kara's? It's Kara or Kara, I don't remember. Meteor to fly after him. Bartz, Lena, and Ferris manage to use adamantite from the meteors left on Earth to construct a portal to the alien world, and then they warp away.
Now, this is the end of the first third of the game. The second third takes place on Galuf's world and is primarily a fight against Exdeath with a few treks through his castle. There's not much to be said about this. It's very repetitive. Like, it's always like, oh, this is our last stand, oh, this is a huge battle, and then the next huge battle and the next last stand, and it just happens over and over again until it finally ends. Yeah, the one notable thing about this is that there's one moment where Galuf is killed by Exdeath, and Kara replaces him. She has all the abilities and equipment as Galuf, but has totally different stats, so that means that all of your work training Galuf as a knight or a monk is now worthless because she has crap physical damage and defense. There's a long section through Exdeath's castle, and then we meet the tree himself. Yes, He's a tree, by the way.
Exdeath's ultimate plan is to merge the two worlds together into one, which sounds like a really good idea, but I guess we're fighting him now. And even though we win, it happens anyway, so what was the point exactly? Anyway, we're now in the merged world, the third of the game. And in a really cool effect, the continents on both worlds appear here, but overlapping. Previously inaccessible areas are now accessible, and the few side quests and bits of non-linearity this game has are now available. Mostly this consists of collecting more weapons, one new job, and some powerful weapons and armor. Speaking of powerful weapons, the main story of this third is that Exdeath is plunging parts of the world into void. In order to stop him, we have to complete 4 lithographs representing the 4 elements to unlock the ultimate weapons in this castle place I forgot the name of. Oh yeah, Sealed Castle, that's right. Classics like Excalibur and the Masamune, the Holy Lance, the Yoichi Bow, and the Rune Axe are just some of these.
So we collect all the weapons. We also collect all the summons, the optional summons, just because they're really powerful and useful in the late game. Then we go to Exdeath's lair, the Void itself.
This is the final area of the game. It has a lot of mini-bosses, final treasures, and a very long cutscene before finding the final boss, Exdeath in tree form. So yeah, pretty standard stuff. So we kill Exdeath and he comes back as Neo Exdeath, an even more powerful enemy than before. Thanks for starting Bad Trope 5. So we kill him as well, then bada bing bada boom. They all live happily ever after.
So I've been talking a lot about this game's good stuff, its ripe spots. But there's a big, not so good thing about Final Fantasy V. That would be the themes.
Compared to every other Final Fantasy game, even the original, this game is very childish, I guess. It seems as if we're playing a fairy tale. For example, this is the only Final Fantasy game where everyone is okay at the end. Seriously, all the good guys and innocent people are just fine and dandy at the end. All those towns that Exdeath casts in the void, yeah, they're all good. Galuf and the 4 warriors are still dead, but they're ghosts, I guess, and they rest in peace. Another example of this is the music. Yeah, it's all pretty good with a few standouts. Most notably the penultimate boss theme, which is what you're hearing right now. But the waveforms themselves are full of horns and cheerful strings. Most of the songs would honestly fit right into a Disney movie.
So that's Final Fantasy V. I think the SNES version is a classic that still holds up today and should be treasured for a long time to come. At least the English translated ROM. Although I would recommend the GBA one as well. I have a love-hate relationship with it, but just as long as you steer clear of the Android, iOS, and Windows ports, you'll do just fine. All in all, I give this game 3.09 out of pi.